Hello, I'm Paavo Järvi, and this is Living the Classical Life.
Today we travel to the seaside resort city of Pärnu, located in Estonia on the Baltic Sea and popular in the region as a holiday destination with its many beaches, restaurants, and hotels. With its distinctive tree-lined streets and wooden architecture, the city was the summer home to violinist David Oistrakh, who gathered his musician friends to play together in his green dacha for ad hoc performances. Paavo Järvi created the Pärnu Music Festival and includes the Estonian Festival Orchestra as well as an academy orchestra for young musicians with active conducting masterclasses for rising conductors. We caught up with Paavo between rehearsals to talk about his musical path, his work with young musicians, and how his musical family impacted his own development. Paavo, thank you so much for being on the show, Living the Classical Life, and thanks for welcoming me here to the festival.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
When I look at your musical family, I would imagine that there are certain, perhaps many, advantages to having had a family with conductors, not just musicians, but conductors, so that certain things, even if, for example, your father didn't directly show you something specific, I think by osmosis you would have many advantages, even with stage psychology, just being in your element as a conductor musician.
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be able to even point out any disadvantages, frankly. It's very rare when a conductor has a close enough conductor friend to be able to share experiences, because conductors don't tell each other much. But if you have a father who's a conductor, and who's a very good conductor, he will tell you a lot of things that literally will make your life much easier. Easier, one thing. Other thing, that there are a lot of things. I see a lot of very famous conductors who make obvious miscalculations and mistakes because they just don't know. Nobody has told them that don't do this. This is exactly the trap which you should. Famous names who just not conducting very well because they still are going through these moments of discovery on their own. If you have a father as a conductor, he can warn you about these things, and you're a little bit closer to that inside information, and there's a lot of it, which usually you have no access to unless you have somebody in your family.
So what I'm hearing is that there is a process here that perhaps saves time versus experience, but did you also feel like you were naturally, by character, suited to be a leader?
I never thought about this like that. I thought that I wanted to be a conductor because my father was a conductor, and I loved the way he was having fun and how much he enjoyed music. And basically, his love for orchestral repertoire was so infectious that by the time we got to a certain point, we were so in it. You know, we knew all the standard repertoire and all the basics and a lot of things that were not so standard. And we heard it at home, we went to his concerts, we were reading scores with him all the time. So it somehow was a second nature. You grew up with liking orchestral music, something that is not so common. Very few people have that experience.
I'm trying to understand the atmosphere in which you grew up. Was there a question that you would be a musician, would not be a musician?
No, there was never a question of me being a musician or not. In fact, it was never even a question of what kind of musician. It was definitely always conductor. And it was way before you knew what the conducting was about, really, because you wanted to be a conductor since you were a kid, and because of him. And by the time you kind of started understanding what it is, it was too late. We were way in it already. And it was fun anyway. I mean, I still wouldn't change it for the world.
So there's this amazing photograph of you as a young boy with Shostakovich in frame.
Here in Pärnu.
That was here in Pärnu. Do you remember that day? What was the circumstance behind your meeting Shostakovich?
Well, we have a summer house here. It was clearly before we left for US. It was Soviet time, and a very famous Estonian choral conductor, Gustav Ernesaks was his name. He was the one who kind of was the head of the singing festivities, and he was a kind of a legendary figure, a composer, and was a conductor of a male chorus here, which was a kind of very symbolic thing during the Soviet time. And Shostakovich, in fact, wrote a piece for his chorus, which is an a cappella piece. It's a very Sovietic piece, but still, it's called Ustavus. I don't even know how to translate it. It's something, loyalty or something like that, for male chorus. and he brought Shostakovich to our house, and my father knew him. And I was 7 years old, maybe, around there. And I was totally uninterested in staying because I had my friends playing and my sister was around, and it was not interesting to hang out there with some old guy. But I remember my father saying, "You have to stay here, it's a very important man." And I stayed. And at that time, of course, they took this Gustav Ernesaks took a lot of pictures, and only one of them has survived because he, for some reason, while he was trying to develop these photos, they were all exposed to light. It was the old times, and so there was one picture that's left from this.
But this probably was rather typical of your early childhood. You probably had great musicians passing through the home all the time. I mean, who were some of the other ones that, in passing, you might have?
Well, I mean, because of the Soviet Union was a closed country, Iron Curtain. Most of the people were the great Soviet artists, people like Rostropovich, Rojdestvinsky, Arvo Pärt. Who else? Shostakovich was one of them. Many Gilels. There were a lot of people who were in our house and who came through. Khachaturian, probably many more. Who I don't, remember now, but Shchedrin, but there are Soviet era people, the people who might not be so well known here anymore, but people like Viktor Pikaizen, I don't know, do you know the names, or many Russian pianists, violinists, cellists, Daniel Shafran, and many others.
I know that you had a close association with Radu Lupu. What was it like to work with this man and musician?
It's so difficult to even imagine that he's not with us anymore. And with Radu, it's very hard to find words in any case to describe his music making because the words somehow bail. There is something that for me at least, makes him stand out among all the other musicians that I've met. Certainly pianists and instrumentalists, but more than that, just all the musicians I've met. There is a sense of like he can see behind what's behind the surface of music, and of course we all kind of think we do that, but with him, he made you realize and see the layers of colors and depth and timing and everything that you thought you knew and you actually didn't. Brahms concerto, Schumann concerto, he was able to somehow make a new piece out of all of this, and something new, something without any gimmicks, without any effects. It was all just honest, great music making. But what one might confuse with a kind of a pure genius, intuitive genius, that he was anyway, but he also had a very strong set of beliefs, exactly what he wanted and how well he knew the score. And it wasn't just intuition all the time. That moments of kind of suspended time came in concert, but when he was rehearsing, he was extremely clear what he wanted. Here we don't want to rallentando. Here it doesn't make any sense because the harmonic progression, certain things which we all thought we knew, and yet he managed to see yet another layer of depth in all of these pieces. He was also somebody who was very communicative during the concerts, which I love. We were always sort of talking almost. He would have a conversation, and that conversation is something that is actually in the music. And once you see somebody so openly taking part in this conversation without any conventions, without any pose, he was very, very somehow detached from anything that was formal or anything that was formally called tradition. He made it up as he was going along, or at least that's how it sounded. I know very well that when I conducted the Fourth Symphony of Brahms, or Second Symphony of Brahms, and he was watching from the balcony because he was playing in the first half. And then later on he told me exactly that this transition here and that transition here, don't wait a little bit before you go here. It was so structurally clear, and yet when he would do something, you feel like he just got inspired and just some other magic force took over, but actually there was a method to this madness.
It seemed to me, although I never witnessed him rehearsing, it seemed to me that he was also extraordinarily demanding of himself.
He was very demanding of himself, but also others, which I liked. I liked that. I mean, if he didn't hear the legato line enough in a Schumann concerto beginning, then he wouldn't go on until he really found that the player would play legato, because oboe players all think that they know how to do this, because their teachers told them how to play this. And he said, no, this is not how it should be. And he was very, very adamant in getting it exactly right. And at the end, like we all know that there are layers, and these layers are understood only people who are on a similar wavelength or level, so to speak. And a sentence may sound logical to an 18-year-old. The same sentence will be have a different meaning when you're 50. And you remember, so like, oh yeah, my teacher told me, that's what he meant. Because you just have no experience yet to know what's underneath that sentence. Even though on the surface it looks like a simple, every kid knows that, you know. And then you're 50 and said, now I understand. It wasn't, I was a kid and I didn't understand. So he had this capacity to really say certain things, and he always found the people who understood him, you know. Oh, he was a magician.
So you had a lot of wonderful early memories from this place. So did it become an obvious choice to start the music festival here? What was the idea behind starting?
Well, the idea was to come back to Estonia and bring the family here. We have a lot of musicians in the family. We have all the cousins. We have 25 people who are all musicians, and very good musicians. And so this is the place where is the most logical place to meet. And of course, the summer in Estonia is the time to be here, because winters are long and quite dark, and summer is the kind of a magic window. And especially we call officially, even though the capital of Estonia is in Tallinn, they call it Pärnu, the summer capital of Estonia, you know, because everybody comes here in the summer. There's a coastline, there is the beaches. It's very close to Tallinn, and there is all of a sudden life in this town, which usually is dead, but life for about 3 or 4 months, and then again it becomes a sweet kind of provincial little town. And this is what I love about this place, that it hasn't lost its old world character and atmosphere.
I'm trying to get a sense of how Estonia, of course, not geographically speaking, how Estonia fits into the musical world, what it means for you to be an Estonian musician in terms of how that fits into musical influences, your upbringing. I don't really have a great complete sense of what that means, if that's important to you.
Estonia is very important. I mean, this is one of the kind of missions that we have, and since early childhood that was sort of a main focus, is to always be Estonian, because Estonia is a very small country. We've always been occupied by a larger power, 800 years of Germany and Sweden and Denmark, but most brutally and most often and most recently Russians. And it was before communists, and of course now communists. And I think that there is a lot of fear now that Russians might try something again. And the only way to really keep your culture alive is through its arts and through the language. And basically what Russians are doing, and they're doing it in Ukraine, they're doing it everywhere where they occupy, they're trying to change. There's a program of Russification, where you basically populate as many Russian speakers into a country where you can then change the language, official language, to Russian. And when that happens, that's the beginning of an end, because language is one of the very few things, and the music, and that keeps the culture alive, that identity alive. And so we always were very adamant of saying this is an Estonian conductor, Estonian composer, Estonian orchestra, Estonian. That's why the orchestra that is here in the festival is not called Pärnu Festival Orchestra, it's called Estonian Festival Orchestra. In case we go and do a tour, then the word Estonia is in the headline.
How much are you able to program Estonian music on tours abroad, and how is that received?
Right now, it's very easy. In fact, it's not only easy, a lot of people ask for it. A lot of presenters are very, very interested in having an Estonian composer. We are very blessed by having a very strong Estonian composing landscape. Of course, from the biggest guru is Arvo Pärt, and many, many people who, were contemporaries and a little bit younger. They were clearly influenced by Arvo Pärt, and not only influenced by his music, but also by the possibility of being somebody as a composer. It is a little bit of similar thing like Finland and Sibelius. But Arvo Pärt is not the first, clearly. I mean, there is Eduard Tubin, there's Heino Eller, there are a lot of people. There is, for a country of 1.5 million, or less than 1.5 million, we have 10 famous composers or more, something you cannot say about many much bigger countries.
So, for example, some years ago, Arvo Pärt came to the United States and I know he's a national hero here, but he came to the United States and was greeted like a rock star there. Does that knowledge surprise you at all, that a composer would go over to the United States and have such a celebrity's
he has this kind of reception everywhere. And of course it helps. First of all, everybody knows his name. I had conversations with John Adams, who says, well, Arvo Pärt is, in awe of Arvo Pärt. But I also had a conversation a couple of weeks ago or a week ago with Hans Zimmer, with a Hollywood, film composer who also is in awe of Arvo Pärt. And everybody in between. There are so many people who don't know anything at all about music and classical music or any music, but they know Arvo Pärt. For some reason it has touched them, and they've seen it from movies or films or somewhere.
So part of this Pärnu Festival is the Conducting Institute. What I'm trying to get at here is, for a general audience who's wondering how a conductor learns, how can you teach conducting? How can you give them the technique, but give them their own voice? I'm thinking about Marin Alsop talking about Leonard Bernstein, where he would say, don't imitate me, but do it like this. How can you teach these conducting students and not have them imitate you?
I think there is nothing wrong with imitation. I think every student should have in the beginning somebody who they admire, who they kind of try to imitate. If you are already 50 years old and you're still imitating somebody, that's a different issue. That's a problem. But in Asian cultures, really imitating exactly what the master is doing, be it in any profession. It doesn't have to be necessarily arts, but really learning how things work exactly the way the master used to do it. That is totally legitimate first step. Second step already is to find what you keep, what's not right for you, but you at least have somewhere to start. And so I prefer somebody imitating me than somebody imitating somebody who doesn't know how to conduct. But I don't want them to become clones. It's just that there are certain basic things that we all believe in, like, technical aspects, which, conducting is a little bit different from violin playing or instrumental education, because in the beginning, teacher will tell you this is the right position for the hand. This is how you hold the bow. The wrist is too high, wrist is too low, whatever, elbow. They will set a certain position, certain standard, and you accept it as a kid. By the time somebody studies conducting, they're already independent and intelligent people who don't automatically accept anything. They need to agree to it. They need to think it through, say, oh yeah, that makes sense, And so the best way of really dealing with it is to conduct in front of them, or in my case, most of the people who come and study, and this year we had 350 applicants, they are here specifically because they want to study with me, because they liked what they saw. So it's not so much an academic aspect of, let me basically start talking about what's conducting. They know. They know what they want to study or who they want to study with. And then, like with every single aspect in life, you have to connect to somebody first, and then there is a moment when you have to let go.
I'm thinking about your position, finding your own voice as conductor, with a very formidable father. Did you ever feel the shadow that you had to prove something different from him? I would imagine that you absorbed most of what you could learn from, if not all, from your father. But at a certain point, did you recognize that you were going in a different direction?
Not really. Not really. I think that the life, if you are your own man, you will go your direction anyway. It doesn't necessarily, it's not as dramatic as sort of abandoning or rebelling or somehow. That's a little bit of a kind of a Hollywood version of it. You have an infinite number of possibilities, and if you believe in a certain simply put, a technical aspect, of things that are important first steps for conducting. Then, and we're talking about conducting is basically not a technical, there are a lot of technique there, but it is not the main thing about conducting. The main thing about conducting is studying the score and how you hear the score. And that also comes and changes. So, but if you have a student who loves music and is well educated, but cannot start or cannot take a tempo change without explaining, or cannot show anything without explaining and stopping the orchestra, that means that this person needs a very basic help. And I'm not even going to spend any time talking about, is this transition logical, or is it musically a good idea to do what you do? That is something that they need to figure out on their own, because this is not the right format. The format here is to look objectively at somebody, say, okay, if I can fix this one thing, it'll make your life a bit easier. At the end of the day, it's not going to be really enough. The masterclass format is exactly that. It is an added layer of information to something you already have or are currently experiencing in school, for example, or with your own teacher, and or in this case, many musicians who are from big orchestras, from Berlin Philharmonic, New York Philharmonic. I have people here who all have come to study conducting because they want to know a little bit about this. They want to know how it is, and they leave as changed people, because a lot of them never realized how complicated it actually is sitting in the orchestra. And they are great masters of their own instrument. I mean, this time we have a concertmaster of Vienna Philharmonic studying conducting here. And he's like, oh my God, this is difficult.
Your father is 85 this year, and I'm sure you have some awareness of how the world regards him, but how do you regard your father's place in the musical world? Does he have or embody something that you wish that you could still yet have?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's still, and it's getting stronger in a strange way, because seeing somebody so sort of in love and excited about music still at the age of 85, there is no better reason or better example of how important and how strong of an influence music can be in your life than by looking at him. at looking at him and seeing him becoming a total child on the stage, because it is so enjoyable. And you see this man walking to the stage who is already, walking a little slower than he used to, and so on. And then he becomes this kid who is full of humor, full of energy, full of fantasy, full of sort of unexpected ideas, a sparkle in his eye all the time. And you can see, it was a little bit like Bernstein. I remember when I studied with him, he was the same. He was already quite an old man, but when he started conducting, all of a sudden, he was a healthy, strong, as if he went back to his youth, And in a way, there's no better example than seeing the power that music has on people than looking at my father.
Paavo, thank you so much for joining us here on the show, and I wish you many more years of success and inspiration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
very
very
nice
much.
to
Yes.
see you. Thank you.
Pleasure.